And the rousing rendition on the refrain from all of you. I can hardly hear myself up here. That's fantastic. Okay, now on to the business of our meeting here. First, let me ask you that you approve Ann Smith, class of '84, for another 3-year term on the Board of Managers. Thank you very much. I'm sure she'll be thrilled. She will be thrilled. She's very happy to be working with us. I also would like to bring forward for approval a new member nomination to the Board of Managers. So let me tell you a little bit about it. Rashma Koda, class of 2015, has served as a class connector since graduating from Westtown in 2015, and will be graduating Lafayette College with a media studies degree later this spring. She's passionate about supporting Westtown and exploring more ways to engage our alumni community, and will bring unique talents and strengths to the task. Do I have your approval for Rashma's nomination for her first 3-year term? Thank you again. Now, on to the nominations for the Association Board officers. This meeting marks the end of my 3-year term as clerk, and I wanted to take a moment to extend my sincere and heartfelt gratitude to all of my board colleagues whose good spirits and hard work made this position a true joy to hold. Together we accomplished the significant and important updating of the group's bylaws, creating a board structure that is in keeping with Quaker process, and general improvement in the overall operation of the board by, for example, instituting well-articulated committees focused on communications, advancement, admissions, and Quaker life. I've also been very pleased to build on the strong relationships begun under Ted Moon's prior leadership with the school's administration, especially with Tori and Carl. I would also like to acknowledge the tremendous leadership within the board that is paving the way for an even more active and engaged board and alumni community. With that, I'd like to lift up the nomination of Dina Schmidt, class of 1984, to be the next clerk of the law board. As the associate clerk for the last 3 years, Dina has worked very closely with me on the advisory committee, developing an intimate knowledge of the needs of our school and opportunities to expand the reach of our alumni association. Dina is a tremendously passionate Westonian, a proud parent of 2 alumni, and the arts department chair at the Church Farm School. With extensive experience in the world of independent schools and a deep love for education and Westtown, we can think of no better person to assume the role than her. Do I have your approval of Dina's nomination for a 3-year term as clerk? Thank you very much. With Dina now leading the role of associate clerk, we now look to the burgeoning leadership on the law board to assume that role. While having only been a member for 2 years, Karobi Acharya, class of 1982, has demonstrated genuine commitment and leadership skills as the clerk of the admissions committee. Additionally, her dedication to upholding a high standard for member participation and the faithful representation of our alumni association is nothing short of remarkable. The parent of 1 current student and 1 young alumni, Karobi works at the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation and directs their strategies for global learning. The members of the advisory committee would be honored to have her assume the role of associate clerk. Do I have your approval of Karobi's nomination for a 3-year term as associate clerk? Thank you very much. Next, I'd like your help in celebrating the tremendous contributions of 3 longtime board members who will be stepping down this year. Collectively, they represent over 40 years of service to the board. These individuals have served your Alumni Association in Westtown dutifully in that time, and their thoughtful and dedicated contributions have been invaluable. First, Mary Eby, class of 1956, has served as a truly joyful presence on our board and stewarded our membership through countless changes. Her enthusiastic and passionate energy has served to keep many Westonians connected to one another and the school in profound and meaningful ways for 19 years. Mary, please rise and be recognized. Thank you. Next, Tom Wagner, class of 1985, has served as the clerk for the Communications Committee and has brought a tremendous strategic vision to our group. He has been a bright and proactive member of our board for 15 years, and we have benefited greatly from his wisdom during that time. Tom, please rise and be recognized. And third, and by no means least, Pete Lane, class of 1957. So I guess no more needs to be said, but I'll say it anyway. He is a distinguished and long-serving member of the community. Having taught West Town students, including me, for over 50 years, he has been deeply in tune with the core values of the school and has embodied them wholly since graduating here in 1957. Pete has served on the law board since 2013 and held several roles, including clerk of the Quaker Life Committee. Pete, please rise and be recognized. While their days of supporting the alumni community and our beloved alma mater are far from over, we wish them nothing but the best as they move on to other pursuits. Please keep an eye out for an article in the Summer Westonian about all three. Okay, that's our business for today. We next want to move to the annual roll call. This is always fun. All right, first, the class of 2014 is here for their 5th reunion. Would everyone from the class of 2014 please rise? Enough, you can stand up. Would everyone from the class of 2009 celebrating their 10th reunion please stand? How about the class of 2004 back for 15 reunion?
I think everyone else is sleeping.
Anyone else from the thousands and 2010s? Please rise. Okay. Celebrating their 20th reunion, would alumni from the class of 1999 please stand? Class of 1994 here for 25 years. You're going to have to work on those folks. We're active here or something. Anyway, okay. Let's see if we have a little better luck in the 1980s. Back to the 30th reunion, everyone from the class of 1989, please rise. Excellent. This is always fun. All right, celebrating the 35th reunion. How about the class of 1984, please stand. parties are a little less intense to get over here. How about everybody else from the 80s? Who else is here from the 80s? All right. This almost pains me to say, but how about my classmates, members of the class of 1979, celebrating 40 years? Please. Good. Excellent. All right. For the 45th reunion, everyone from the class of 74? Everybody else in the 70s, how about you stand up too? And now, for the 50th reunion class of 1969, with alumni from that class, about 70. That's wonderful. In 10 years, classmates, we got something to live up to. Okay. How about everyone from the 55th reunion class of 1964? Anybody else from the 60s here? Excellent. Celebrating their 60th reunion with members of the class of 1959, please. Fantastic. Banner included. That's fantastic. About everyone from the class of 1954, 65 years ago. Please stand. And anybody else in the 50s? Is there anyone from the 75th reunion class of 1944 here with us? Okay. How about the 70th reunion class of 1949? Is there anyone else from the 40s here? Wonderful. Finally, for alumni from the 30s, I believe that Lou Evans and Marion Fuson, both class of 1938, intended to be with us today. Wonderful. I don't want to forget all the supportive spouses and partners of Westonians. Where would any of us be without them? Would all class connectors please stand and be recognized for your service as volunteers to this community? Members of the Alumni Association Board of Managers, please stand. I know you're there. Faculty and staff are busy all over campus helping with the festivities of this weekend. I encourage you to say hello to them and honor them in person as you enjoy your weekend on campus. I'd like to recognize our retiring faculty and staff, Kenny Joseph, Wendy Dubas, Sue Gold, and David Johns. As well, we say farewell to two members of our administrative council, Margaret Haviland and Kristen Crawford. Margaret will be head of school at Westfield Friends School, and Kristen will be lower school principal at Trinity School in New York City. So we recognize them. Finally, members of the Board of Trustees, would you please rise and be recognized? Okay, now I'd like to introduce Carl Vallett, class of 2003, Director of Alumni Engagement.
Thank you, Kevin. I think after this meeting, I'm going to have to run upstairs to my office and get my connectors from 94 and 99 on the board. A little bit of work to be done there. All right. So I have some exciting things to share with you about what's happening on campus today, but before I do, I wanted to take a moment to honor a fellow alumnus, a colleague, and a dear friend. Kevin Moore has served as clerk of the West Town Alumni Association Board of Managers since 2016, so you probably feel like you know him if you've been to the last 2 or 3 of these meetings. What you probably don't know about Kevin is that he is an enthusiastic and unwavering supporter of the alumni basketball game. Kevin has failed to miss a game in the 5 years that I've been back, and I suspect his streak goes back a bit farther than that.
Pretty much. I'm too old for it, for sure.
We'll keep the streak alive. So, like the coach of any good team, Kevin has been a tremendous leader for the WA board, helping us to galvanize our membership and focus our efforts into meaningful and rich contributions to the school. Just like the star player of any good basketball team, Kevin has always been there putting in the extra effort and dedicating himself wholly to the success of our entire membership. And just like the fans of any good team, Kevin has been there all the while, watching and cheering us on in all that we do. So, if you'll allow me to truly belabor the metaphor. Kevin, it is on behalf of the WA Board, West Town School, and our entire Alumni Association. Thank you, Kevin.
I'm definitely not Michael Jordan, but
The number felt fitting.
thank you very much.
You're very welcome. Thank you, Kevin. Okay. So Kevin's tremendous contributions are a reminder that our alumni community is truly a special one, filled with togetherness, devotion, and love. And it's in the spirit of those precious qualities that I want to share with you some of the new and fun activities that are happening on campus this year, and in particular, our all-new student showcase. If we could please go to the first slide of this presentation. That'd be great. We will get there. Well, let me start by saying I don't necessarily need the slides to tell you about how lovely all of these activities are happening at campus. Our student showcase in Main Hall this year will give you an opportunity to drop in on fun and interactive sessions taking place all afternoon. Oop. Here we go. The golden touch, apparently. All right. Thank you, Corey. All right, good. So, fun and interactive showcases happening all afternoon, including things like you can visit with our middle school students and look at their archaeological dig showcase and browse artifacts that these students unearthed right here on campus. And who knows, you might even find something that you left down by the lake a few decades ago. You can meet our robotics team, who recently received the prestigious Chairman's Award for being a model team among thousands. And you can see their robot, the Metal Moose, in action. You can browse student trip showcases for service-oriented and cultural immersion trips in Rome, Puerto Rico, Ghana, and Israel-Palestine. You can also visit with our computer programming students who will guide you in some computer science art making, and will also showcase some of their fabulous projects that they've been working on. And lastly, an opportunity to tell your story. You can join one of our young student filmmakers who will sit you down in front of the lights and interview you about your experience at Westtown and record some video that we would love to share on our website. So I encourage you to stop by that showcase and share stories of your Westtown and the impact that it's made in your life. So all of these showcases, as a reminder, will be happening on the main hall classrooms. If you refer to your program, you will see a listing where they are all taking place. So please stop in on one of these wonderful displays. We would love to have you there. So now, I have the privilege of welcoming to the stage one of the members of the class of '69 for a musical presentation. In recognition of the 50th reunion class, in his senior year, and in the midst of the war in Vietnam, Jeff Peckham composed In Retrospect, as an entry to a Westtown Peace Essay Contest. It became an integral part of the Westtown experience for his class. It was subsequently featured in a movie by Earl Fowler, now held in the Westtown archives, and it is still played by a few of his classmates to this day. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Jeffrey Peckham, class of 1969.
That was fantastic. Thank you, Jeff, for that very lovely performance. It is now my privilege to introduce our keynote speaker, who also happens to be a classmate, friend, and fellow old man. Is it really possible that 40 years have sped by since we graced these hallways? We were seniors then, and we're kind of senior citizens now. Well, you're as young as you feel. Okay, so Don has been working in television for decades, and in doing so has explored some of the world's most interesting and often inhospitable places rarely seen by television audiences. He's the host and narrator of the Travel Channel's long-running Mysteries at the Museum, as well as previous series like Cities of the Underworld and Off Limits. Additionally, he founded Archivist Media to advocate for museums nationally, all the while initiating projects that link classrooms with their local institutions so students can more readily utilize resources available. Please join me in welcoming Don Wildman for his keynote presentation entitled Tunnels, Catacombs, and So Many Sewers, the television travels of Don Wildman.
Before I talk, watch this. I hope. We take the lights down a little bit? Oh no, there's no sound. I knew this would happen. What are we doing? Wing it. All right, so at this part, I'm Don Wild, and that's the forum in Rome. These are people in Japan. That's another man in Okinawa. 1940. All right, what you're seeing is a promo reel, and that is a promo reel from about 10 years ago. I look a lot younger in this. It's so good with the sound. Darn it all. What do you think, Carl? We're starting over. Anyway, good morning, everyone. I'm Don Wildman. All right, what signal am I waiting for? Here goes nothing. No. Sorry, everybody. We did a tech yesterday and everything. All right. I think we're doing something. Somebody's taking over. The technology is moving along. Ready? Sounded good. That sounded promising. Do I push my button or do you push yours? Here goes. I'm going to push. I'm pushing. Lights down.
Western beliefs near the Guatemalan border.
I'm in Tokyo, Japan. I'm in Palermo, Sicily.
This is the Colosseum in Rome, Italy. Konnichiwa. Yoshimina-san.
Nice to meet you, Don. Hi. I love your car. Thank you.
There's a large escape tunnel over there. I gotta take a look down there.
That's cold.
If you could get down in there, dig around a little bit, who knows what you could find.
That's not smart at all. Just a little stuck. Right here is freaking cool. It's a whole other path.
This was an advanced civilization. They were geniuses in math, astrology, and engineering. And then they practically disappeared. And the jungle just swallowed everything. yellow. All right. Let's take it right down there. Okay. Thoroughly disgusting environment. Look at this. Look at what we're walking through. Very nice. Let's right on the wall. We're going down in there too. Stick to the wall. Stick to the wall.
All right. Thank you, that's it. See, it needed the sound. Thank you very much. It would have been hard to do without it. Well, hi, that's what's called a promo reel. And if I looked about 10 years younger, it's because I was in that. I'm suddenly using my old clips to promote a new series that's a throwback to an old series that starts shooting this July. Such is the cyclical nature of my chosen profession. What is old is new again. Even television hosts attending their 40th class reunion, it's a miracle. Anyway, that's great. I love that particular show, Cities of the Underworld. It was all about steam tunnels and sewer lines and musty basements and places generally unfit for human habitation, some of which I learned about right here on the West Town campus. 4 decades later, thank you, West Town School. Good morning, fellow alumni, faculty, staff, those current students who had nothing better to do on a Saturday morning. My name is Don Wildman, and I am a proud member of the West Town class of 1979. Can I have a great greatness indeed, in an era when the very concept must be reclaimed. We laughed at the 70s, have returned to reassume our mantle and make what was once great, great again. Which has all kinds of implications in the awkward age we're living through, but we'll leave that for Quaker meeting tomorrow. Now, it could be viewed as unlikely, ironic, inexplicable by certain ex-roommates of mine present here today that I would be chosen 40 years later to stand and speak. I attended West Town for only 2 years, my junior and senior. I was not by any stretch a stellar student nor a notable athlete. You will find my name on exactly no plaques or honors anywhere on this campus. Although I do stand by my exemplary service operating the dishwasher in the kitchen. For that, I will take full credit. Thank you, Ernie, wherever you are. I certainly spent a good deal of time up here on the stage with my fellow classmates in our elaborately costumed roles, treading the boards, as we say. But by any measure, mine was a checkered past, at least academically speaking. I never even finished undergrad after graduating from a prestigious prep school, which makes a lot of sense. Nonetheless, Steve Coleman, Pal Savage, I suggest I am a more than adequate selection today, if only to address how transformative the West Town educational experience can prove to be throughout one's life, past the gates, beyond the campus, out there in the world. For me, and I assume most of us here today, I imagine that's where West Town really delivered on its promise, on its part of the bargain. Unbeknownst to the kid I was when I arrived here in 1979, I was being granted a passage for a journey ahead, a very valuable ticket to be redeemed in a mysterious yet undeniable fashion. Hold that thought. Here goes nothing. Oh, that's West Town. There we go. So these are some images of me being adventurous. It's been my great good fortune these last several decades to earn my living as what is loosely referred to as a television adventure host, which is to say I'm often doing something of an adventurous sort while describing my experience through grunts and groans and semi-formed thoughts to a video camera posted over my shoulder. That's usually the scenario. Whether it's been climbing through a collapsed Nazi bunker system in the Czech Republic, or descending a slimy staircase to the sump pump room of Hoover Dam. My professional pursuit, lo these many years, has been to endeavor into the nooks and crannies of tunnels, crypts and caverns, abandoned factories, forgotten mine shafts, the moldering corners of cultures left for lost. It's rarely pretty, it's never clean. At times, it's utterly disgusting. But I like to think that it's all in the service of a higher cause, pulling back the layers of human history, studying civilization from an unusual vantage point. And what could be better than that? So here's about 2 minutes and 54 seconds of a little adventure. You guys might want to come out here and watch this. This underground location is actually high in the sky. A church carved into a sandstone cliff about 9,000 feet above sea level. To get to it, the crew and I had to climb 2,500 feet, hauling a few hundred pounds of camera gear. Luckily, our guide, Mudabrahan, who's made this journey more than 30 times, brought a group of local men to help us accomplish our mission.
So we're going up there. This is just the approach. You can see when the whole thing goes straight up. It's going to be interesting.
The church we were hiking to is called Abuna Yamada, after the 6th century missionary who, like John the Baptist, came to the wilderness to commune with God and spread the faith. And we're the first American TV crew to make the climb.
This is by far the first major face that we're going up here. And all the, look at these holes. These are all been worn into the rock by thousands of years of worshipers. Three priests of we're going straight up. Whoa, look at that. Down. Oh, heavy. Oh my God. Look at that. Look how barbells in this. You know what's awesome is that we gotta come back down this thing.
The remote church contains copies of lost books of the Bible, still used by the Ethiopian Orthodox Church.
And so they came this high up for the isolation, I suppose.
For isolation, to live spiritual life only,
Okay.
get rid of the secular life.
And the protection, obviously, from being so far up above everything.
Exactly.
All right, can we go in?
Yeah.
Look at this sheer rock face right here. You fall off that, you are gone. The length they went to put a monastery up here on the top of a mountain.
The power of underscoring music. Half my career is depending on that stuff. One perk of my career, though, is remarkable travel experiences. I'm often asked where my favorite destination has been. I mean, we've been all over the world and hundreds. My wife has joined me on a lot of them, and I always answer the same thing. It's Ethiopia. And if I accomplish anything this morning, it will have been to convince all of you to visit that country once in your lifetimes. I'm not kidding. And later on, meaning in a few minutes, we're going to talk about more of that. But first, more about me. Mine is an employment, it's only a page, it's okay. Mine is an employment not listed on any job search. You can't be trained at it, it's so rife with strange and absurd moments requiring skills one seemingly didn't know you had until attempting them on national television. Belay across a raging river while delivering an explanatory speech to camera? Sure, no problem. Scuba beneath an iceberg in 35-degree water while describing Titanic's strange fate? Not a problem. Helicopter to an Andean peak in gale force winds to explain an historic plane crash? God, I'd love to. My specific niche within the adventure business is history and geography, which over the years has evolved into a kind of tedious passion of mine, boring my friends and family members at cocktail parties and dinners. Thankfully, I have a job. I seem to have an obsessive desire to connect dots that probably lands me somewhere on the spectrum, and it's that kind of borderline personality disorder that can get you a gig on television. So, if you can't apply and there's no training, how do you get the job? Well, for me, it was answering the question, can you paddle a canoe? Or maybe that was my answer to a more general query of why should you be the host of Men's Journal, a Saturday morning adventure program which had lost its host a month earlier and was seeking a replacement who turned out to be me, because I could paddle a canoe. Somehow that was enough for the executive assistant to recommend me up to her boss, forgetting that I should be looking more pictures here. See what I'm doing? All kinds of adventures there. Somehow that was enough, paddling a canoe, for the executive assistant to recommend me up to her boss, and it was 1997, and I was suddenly on ESPN.
Wow, this is spectacular. Don't go away. Come back. For more from Chile on Men's Journal.
I know, it's good, isn't it? Well, that was fun, but it got canceled after one season, and I returned to making a living in the myriad ways that actors have always made livings: bartending, extra jobs, and the dreaded infomercials.
The hood opens easily, so all daily level checks can be done in moments with your feet on the ground. More important, when the VHD gets into the workshop, this truck can be worked on faster and more efficiently.
Hold on. And more infomercials.
Along with a reputation as a great guitarist, Elvin Bishop will always be remembered for this timeless ballad. Here's 1976. It's got 20 classics, over 70 minutes of music. And just listen to these artists: Rod Stewart, Elton John, the Bee Gees.
Yes, Mom, your private school dollars at work. But hey, it was great music. Finally, I got a real show, this time as the hitchhiking ghost host on the paranormal Weird Travels. Perhaps you remember this fellow from the days of low-resolution video.
For the weary traveler, finding the perfect hotel room can be a challenge. Either the room is too small or the price too high. Stay the night at a haunted hotel, and you might find yourself sharing a room with a man who died of plague, or the ghost of a jilted bride. You might say it gives the term double occupancy a whole new meaning.
It's clever wordplay. That's Believe it or not, that show got renewed twice. But then it too was canceled, and my production company pals explained that while they'd like to recommend me for their new project, the network thought I was too clean cut for a show called Cities of the Underworld, a series I salivated to do because it was tombs and tunnels and catacombs, places to see rats and breathe mold and contract asbestos-related diseases. But as luck would have it, the guy they cast instead of me wasn't right for the job, and again they needed a replacement. And when opportunity met preparation, I delivered an intangible something. And renewals and subway ads and even a couple of billboards followed, and after 10 years in the hosting business, I finally had a career. Boy, was my wife relieved. So that was Travel Channel. But I started on ESPN, then I went to Travel, then I was hired by Discovery, worked for BBC, and after 8 years back on Travel, I just re-signed for another 3 years. I'm a journeyman outfielder who just won't quit the business. And I feel lucky to do so because basically what I get to do now is encourage television viewers to see the world like they might not otherwise. And I think there's value to that in our present political dimension, especially. So before I leave you today, let me do my best Alexander Hay and explain a very cool place that's very far away. Remember Al up here? I tried to get a pointer, they don't make them anymore. All right, Ethiopia. If I had a pointer, I'd walk over here like he used to do and go, whap! Ethiopia! It's in the Horn of Africa, surrounded by Somalia, Sudan, South Sudan, Eritrea, Djibouti, and all that rest of it. Interestingly, this is my vamp part, so I warn you. I remember those days as vital to my life because that man, we didn't have any internet. We didn't have anything. Nothing. We sat in this room with no clue what was happening anywhere in the world. And he even watch television in those days, and this was 1979. And that man stood up here and brought the world to life in a way that was so immediate and so serious and so interesting and so adult. And that's what I always appreciated about him. He never talked down to us. And I look forward to that assembly. It was once a month, right? It was Wednesdays once a month. And I look forward to that. It was delicious to be in his presence and with a map, ahead of us. So the thing I'm here to show you about is a particular place in Ethiopia. First of all, Ethiopia, 13 provinces. This is not them, but I'm talking about the ones in the north, up here, Amhara and Tigray. The capital is Addis Ababa in the middle here. The famous stuff, the Afar region up here is where they found Lucy, Australopithecus, which is to say the entirety of Ethiopia tells the story of mankind. I mean, that's what's remarkable and rare about this place. It's also the oldest independent country in Africa. It was the one country that was not taken over and colonized. The Italians tried to do it in the 30s, but they didn't succeed. They were out by 1941. And that's really what informs this culture so completely, is the independence and the sort of legendary stand our ground kind of thing that they did. This is what I'm going to talk about. I could go on for hours, and I really don't have it. We have to get on with things here today, but that's the building that interests me. It's the Church of St. George. It's in a place called Lalibela. Anybody been there? Okay, good. So you know. Forgive me. I'm going to talk like you've never been there before. That is an unusual building because it's underground, and it's carved out of stone, okay? This was done in 1187, the 12th century. The basic story in a real thumbnail sketch is a guy named King Lalibela had been to Jerusalem. There's a big Judeo-Christian tradition in Ethiopia, one of the oldest Christian countries in the world. And Lalibela made his way to Jerusalem, as they did in those days, for a pilgrimage. But then the Arab armies took over up there and cut off access to Jerusalem for Christians in Ethiopia. Lalibela took it upon himself, he had a vision, to create a new Jerusalem. And he starts by building with the only materials they had at hand, because there are not a lot of trees in Ethiopia. So this is all the stone buildings that are underground. This is a big World Heritage Site. So I just want to take a moment here and make you recognize that that's the ground. Everything below, a 50, 60-foot tall building, is carved out of solid rock. Every detail you see, every cornice, the roof, the window structures, first time they had a chance to do it, and they had to get it right the first time. Okay? So as you go down, you enter through a tunnel system on the side. This is a working church, a religious site. And you get inside and very quietly walk inside this building, which has a service going on at any given time. This whole thing is part of a whole community of 11 churches that were all carved over a period of 200 or 300 years. Am I right about that? Yeah, right? Several centuries it took to do the 11 other churches. And the whole thing is supposed to be sort of a mimic of Jerusalem. That's my cameraman. You can see one of those holy men sitting over there inside. The entire tunnel, or the entire depression you're standing in, is all peppered with tombs, and there's skeletons and everything inside of it. You get inside, and it looks like this. It's all carved out from the inside out. Beautiful. Really breathtaking details. You just kind of can't believe your eyes. It blows your mind. I had hours of video prepared for you, and then I found out there's a class gift that has to be given. I will rush to my point. And let me find my place, I'm so sorry. The Church of St. George at Lalibela is but one example of numerous structures and sites I've had access to, and what I think I've clearly demonstrated is one fluke of a career. But what I'm really here to say is that I wouldn't be there, I wouldn't have any of the abilities to process the information I'm asked to do so if I hadn't been here at Westtown School. When I entered this school, I was handed that ticket I talked about, passage to the world around me via the strong bonds with my classmates and teachers here in the middle of the Pennsylvania countryside. Al Hay discussed the complexities of world events with a pointer and a map. Lucy Gans argued with me about modern art. I watered Jan Long's orchids over there in the greenhouse and somehow didn't kill them. Tim Luce warned me and my classmates about global warming and climate change in 1978, Science Symposium. And Tom Woodward made me utterly intolerant of sloppy writing and bad grammar. And I never even took his class. How, and you know, it's just sort of osmosis. Somehow, in 2 quick years, my world was exploded before I got to go anywhere. And that's not even mentioning the ongoing friendships with the families of those friends who became family of mine. It goes that deep. It's a kind of mystery how it happened for me, my experience and how it transformed my life. I belonged in the world because Westtown had already sent me there. That's pretty good, isn't it? A few years ago, my wife and I were invited to Washington, D.C. to take part in an initiative sponsored by the Obama administration. Remember them? Yeah. Anyway, it had been brought to their attention, the administration's attention, that young Americans today were not, or then, were not studying abroad the way they once had. That perceived threats from terrorism and war had scared kids and discouraged parents from supporting their endeavors. And this was enormously worrying to the White House because it is, since it's an established fact that in a modern globalized economy, a resume without experience abroad or fluency in another language is a hindrance to your moving up in the world, a serious impediment to further higher tier jobs. They wanted to address this in a modern sort of way, and so they gathered a bunch of TV personalities and Instagram influencers and academics and the head of the Peace Corps and all kinds of people. And we were presented with a day of stories of studying abroad, the likes of which were the Chief of Staff, Dennis McCunnough, Obama's Chief of Staff. Michelle Obama's Chief of Staff talked to us. Ben Rhodes, all kinds of real luminaries came down and spent almost a half an hour each discussing how important their time abroad was to what they do now. Well, 5 years later, with the help of our present America First administration, working diligently to isolate our nation, an entire generation of youngsters are coming of age fearful about their place in the world, if not completely indifferent. This is a very slippery slope. We were told that 5 years ago. It's slipperier now. Westtown addresses this problem every day, directly through programs of foreign study and travel, but indirectly through teaching relationships and student life that cultivates a community mindset, liberal values of inclusion and diversity that have such a bad name in the America of Donald Trump. Westtown has become one of the many beachheads against this erosion of our national character. Because here, young people learn every day how the world is actually improved when lived by such values. So as we walk around today, this bucolic campus, seeing our friends and hanging out, keep in mind how vital a role this school not only played in our lives, but how it's preparing young people like us to fully engage in the world out there, in places far-flung and close to home, with a set of values that encourage empathy, curiosity, and care. Quaker values. It's really something to be grateful for. The right kind of greatness. Thanks.
It is truly wonderful to see you all. This is a very special weekend for me and for all of us. Today I'm going to be honored to share with you a few reflections about Westtown in 2019. But before we go any further, I just want to take a few moments to share a few words of appreciation. I'm sure you will understand how many people worked so hard and brought a lot of sweat and toil to bear so that you could have a fabulous weekend where you are safe and well-nourished and entertained and inspired. And I'm sure you will want to join me in thanking our friends in facilities and housekeeping, transportation and security, food services, communications, technology, and the archives, the front office, the upper school office, the school store and this very theater, athletics and auxiliary programs, upper school students and faculty, and special shout-outs to students and faculty from all three divisions who shared their great work in the Student Showcase, the Student Fair, and various other events across campus this weekend, and those who brought Quakerism to life this past Thursday. The All-School Spiritual Life Committee, the Upper School Religious Life Committee, the Quaker Leadership Program, the Middle School Leadership and Middle School Clerks, and the Upper School Religion Department. Above all, our wonderful friends in the Advancement Office, Ellen Urbanski, Chris Batley, Becky Bernstein, Elizabeth Como, Zoe Marshall, Megan Schlickman, Ray Slater, Courtney Tyus, and the man of the hour, a person of unbelievable creativity, energy, and enthusiasm. Please join me in a warm round of applause for our fabulous Carl Bella. We look forward to this weekend all year, and it is so great that you are here. And sitting up here, I find myself awestruck by the depth and duration of the Westtown relationships in this theater. Reunion gatherings from the 5th to the 80th, classes from 1938 to 2018. Two women previously mentioned in this room, Lou Evans and Marion Fusen, have between them 168 years of history at Westtown, first as students and then as alumni. As for myself, not to brag or anything, but at Westtown School, I have accrued a grand total of 97 weeks. That's 680 days, folks. 680 joyful, challenging, and blessed days as head of school of your alma mater. Serving as head of school at Westtown is an indescribable privilege, an enormous pleasure, and a true honor. As I'm approaching my 2-year mark in this position, though, I have noticed some very strange things happening in my life. Now, the first one that I want to tell you about has to do with technology, and we don't have a great track record of that this morning. But I think you're all familiar with autocorrect. You all have autocorrect on your devices, right? Okay? So on some devices these days, your smartphones, your tablets, autocorrect, actually learns your writing preferences. It learns the spelling of unusual names, I don't know, Judds or something like that. On my devices, all of a sudden, autocorrect now changes the word light, L-I-G-H-T, to the word light, capital L-I-G-H-T. Somehow, in 680 days, I think I've been holding a lot of people in the light, capital L-I-G-H-T. And here's another thing. The other day I was listening to Wait, Wait, Don't Tell Me on NPR, which is not itself an unusual thing. But it was unusual that I heard a joke that nobody in the audience seemed to get but me, but I think you'll get it. The topic was social media, and somebody on that show mentioned Friendster. Do you remember Friendster? People my vintage or thereabouts? The original social media site long before Facebook. Somebody made the joke that Friendster must have been social media for Quaker mobsters. Thank you. That's funny, right? semester makes you think of Quaker Mafia, you might just be a Westonian. If your devices autocorrect L-I-G-H-T to capital L-I-G-H-T, you might just be a Westonian. Okay, it's not a great game, it's not Monopoly. I got some more. If you've accumulated more than your fair share of moose paraphernalia in your life, you might just be a Westonian. If your conversation features words and acronyms not to be found in any dictionary on this earth, Sharping, Grenlick, at KOB, you might just be a Westonian. And apparently, if you are willing to scuba dive under an iceberg, I gotta see that one. You might just be a Westonian. So that's my game. Try playing it this weekend and let me know what you come up with. This weekend is special for all of us because it is by connecting with all of you that we at the school today deepen our understanding of what it means to be a Westonian. And in turn, if, as was suggested, you are able to spend some of your precious time on campus this weekend connecting with today's students, if you're able to visit the student showcase this afternoon or go to the symposiums, I believe that you will find that you share as alumni with today's students a common understanding of what it means to be a Westonian. This was actually the query that guided our worship this past Thursday at all-school meeting for worship in Coach Downey Court. What does it mean to be a Westonian? And into the stillness, or as still as Coach Downey Court can get, ministry was offered by a number of students. There was a senior, a middle schooler, and then what felt like half a dozen third graders. We have a very loquacious class of 2028. But all of them lifted up qualities that I know you would recognize to be of the essence at Westtown. Kindness, deep listening, compassion, respect for others in all their glorious diversity. In other words, if you are determined to heed the Quaker calling to seek out and honor that of God in every person, you just might be a Westonian. That calling remains essential to who we are as a community and to what we aspire to be in the world today. And today, of course, it is more important than ever. And today that calling is heard at Westtown in a very particular way, and I want to tell you about it. Today's faculty, staff, and students understand and agree that this calling means working avidly, above all things perhaps, on diversity, access, equity, and inclusion at our school. We know that in 2019, we cannot fairly claim to seek out, let alone to honor, that of God in each other without urgently pursuing diversity among our students and faculty, and making Westtown as accessible as it can be to all persons regardless of means, without striving to make Westtown as inclusive and equitable as possible for persons of any and all identities, any and all races, ethnicities, national origins, gender identities, sexual orientations, and religions. In today's world, riven by difference and discord, this is critical, foundational work for the Quaker calling at the heart of the Westtown mission. And the good news is that there are fabulous things happening on campus today with regard to diversity, equity, and inclusion. Our student of color population this year is the largest in history at 28% in the entire school and 33% in the upper school. This year, we invested $8 million in financial aid. That, folks, is a quarter of our operating budget, a third if you include tuition remission. Student affinity groups on campus are active and thriving. Our Black Student Union, Black Women's Affinity Group, Latinx Leadership, Asian Student Association, Rainbow, and Students of Color Association. By the time they reach upper school, students can now choose from electives in the African American experience, Asian American experience, and Latinx American experience. But as early as lower school, students find a curriculum and an environment intentionally crafted to ensure that all children see themselves reflected there. For one story this week, Lower School chose an immigration story by a Mexican-American author who described her journey and the importance of libraries and stories in her life as an immigrant. Early on in their 8th grade year, middle schoolers discuss a piece by Nigerian novelist Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, cautioning against accepting one cultural perspective as universal. Faculty and staff across the school engage in robust professional development in cultural competency, positive racial identity development, and implicit bias. And throughout the school, there is passionate and intentional work among faculty to ensure that students of all backgrounds are represented in leadership positions and advanced coursework. Put another way, if it is a driving imperative for you that all community members should feel valued and embraced, you just might be a Westonian. Those of you here for your reunions will understand that it is when children and teens feel truly included and truly seen for who they are, that's when they plant the seeds of wonderful memories that they will come back and celebrate 5 years later, 25 years later, 75 years later. And more importantly, that's when we set them on a course for a purposeful, grounded, and healthy life, when we as a school community succeed in seeking out and honoring that of God in them. You will also understand that at times the best of intentions in this regard can fall short of what is needed, and that we are not perfect. Throughout our history, from 1799 to date, countless Westonians have felt seen and valued at this school. But we also need to recognize that many have not. You'll remember that West End did not admit African American students until 1948. Some of you may have read the excellent action research and oral histories collected by teacher Pat McPherson, herself an alumna, celebrating her 50th reunion today. Pat, are you here? I don't think she is present, but you'll find her today. If you have read Pat's work called Schooled in Diversity, you will have read that only 5 of the 7 black women enrolled at Westtown in the 1950s survived what they called great isolation in order to graduate. One Westtown alumna of color wrote in an essay in Pat's collection that, quote, social isolation defined our experience. Another commented, I don't think the teachers had any conception of the problems I was going through, except to criticize me academically. Another was made to feel, as she put it, quote, that black was ugly in the white world of Westtown. These are deeply painful observations, and yet they are truths of fellow Westonians, and as such, acknowledging them frankly is a critical part of our work. Seeking out and honoring that of God requires clarity. If we fail to be clear-sighted with regard to our shortcomings, we risk falling short again and again. And I'm going to give you an example from my very own desk from just this winter. This winter, the school sent the alumni community a holiday video that some of you might have seen. It was a compilation of archival film footage of winter scenes at school from years and decades past. Skating, sledding, skiing, campus blanketed by snow. In putting together the video, our intention was to evoke the school's rich history of keeping students warm in winter through camaraderie and community, and to share a message of timeless peace and love. Many had the luxury of receiving it in just the way it was intended. But what we failed to recognize before it was too late was that the video, without proper context, without proper acknowledgement and framework, would not evoke nostalgia, but disappointment and even bitterness among alums who did not see themselves reflected in the footage and who indeed were not properly included or supported at Westtown at the time those films were recorded. In response to the email I received, to the video, I received a very important email. The sender identified herself as an alumna, having been one of the very few people of color at Westtown during her time here in the 80s. She wrote to me that as she saw the video, it seemed like Westtown was, quote, trying to take us back to those times when people of color were completely invisible and most definitely on the margins. She asked me, what kind of good old days is this promoting? It grieves me that by the time I, from my position of white privilege, recognized the implications of that video, that it had already done harm. It had already landed as a barb and an insult. I don't know how many people felt about it the way the alumna who wrote to me felt about it, and I don't have any way of reaching out to them. All I could do was assure that one alumna that I saw her feelings as entirely justified, and that we would learn from what she had told us. To seek out and honor that of God in each other is such a simple precept, but let's never make the mistake of thinking that it's easy. It's work. It requires us to be humble. It requires us to check our privilege. It requires clarity. And at this juncture, when such deep pain has been exposed across our society, our Quaker calling demands that we face painful truths. But if we can be clear-eyed about where we have fallen short, we will be clear-eyed as we move forward. In Michael Pollan's latest book, How to Change Your Mind, he exhorts those who are seeking healing as follows. Look for the darkest corner in the basement and shine your light there. I don't think Pollan is a Quaker, at least he's not a Friendster, but he does speak our language. His advice is based on groundbreaking scientific research involving the use of psychedelic drugs as therapy, as healing treatment for mental and emotional issues, addiction, anxiety, depression. From places of deep pain, subjects are advised that during the therapy, if they find anything frightening, a monster, an enemy, a phantom, a villain, they must move not away from it, but towards it. They must look it in the eye and ask, what can I learn from you? In pursuit of learning and growth, in pursuit, if you will, of continuing revelation, you don't run away from your bête noire, you run towards them. Pollan's research echoes accounts of dream work among traditional societies. In his book, Pygmies and Dream Giants, American anthropologist Hilton Stewart wrote about the Sonoy people of Malaysia and their practice of dream work. If you're familiar with this field, you'll know that Stewart has been kind of discredited as an anthropologist, but as a work of psychology, it's totally fascinating stuff. As a society, the Sonoy were remarkably peaceful, harmonious, amicable, and happy. How is that possible, Stewart asked. He said that the answer was in their shamanistic teachings about lucid dreamings. The shamans would teach that if in dreams you encounter a monster, what you do is you move towards it, you embrace it, and you hold that monster until it gives you a gift. Our Quaker calling remains Westtown's most potent way of seeking healing, peace, and a better world. It requires us to hold in the light who have not felt that of God in them went sought and seen in our school. It requires us to look at our individual and collective shortcomings and to ask our history, what gift do you have to give me? What can I learn from you? I see enormous, heartwarming evidence everywhere that our school is ready and willing to work that edge in service of our calling to seek out and honor that of God in each other. It's right there in the way Westtown teaches history. As early as 4th grade, students' introduction to colonial American history is now being taught as an exercise in discerning where power lies. And our 9-year-old students are learning to ask the crucial question, who is powerless here? Whose story is not being told? By the time students arrive in upper school, they turn in Peace and Justice to Korematsu v. United States, which upheld the constitutionality of the internment of Japanese Americans during World War II. And those students get that it is an example of how the powerful have marginalized the powerless over time, of how dominant voices have written our history in a way that silences minority voices. Seniors and now juniors may undertake service projects at our sister school in Ghana, but before departing, they are asked to read Ghanaian-American author Yagi Asi's novel Homegoing, which I highly recommend, which traces 7 generations of the family, starting with its victimization by North Atlantic slave traders, through the legacy of colonialism in Africa and the legacy of slavery itself in the United States, right up through modern-day oppression. And one of those students' first stops in West Africa is Cape Coast Castle, to see where Europeans lived in luxury as abducted Africans were imprisoned and tortured before being shipped west as slaves. Right here at home, Westonians are willing to face uncomfortable truths, willing to ask, what can I learn from you? Pat McPherson's research was a huge step and a great gift to this school. If you haven't read some of it, please do. This year, a group of faculty took the baton from Pat, gathering as a professional development cohort under the leadership of teacher Marissa Colston, our Dean of Diversity and Inclusion, and teacher Kevin Epler in the Religion Department, to take up the task of seeking truth and reconciliation at Westtown School, a project which was modeled after the American Truth and Reconciliation movement, which in turn was inspired by truth and reconciliation work in South Africa after the dismantling of apartheid. Indeed, I think we might fairly say, if you are willing to look into the dark corners and shine a light there, you might just be a Westonian. This is work that will continue. It is so inspiring, and it will clear the way for an ever more inclusive and equitable Westtown. And I want to invite you, starting today, to be a part of it. For one thing, help us reach out to lost alumni. We know for a fact that some, including many alums of color, are lost to the school because, at least up until now, they have been uninterested to reconnect with the school where they felt unsought and unseen. Let them know that we have aspirations, and join us yourselves in those aspirations, that someday soon, Westtown could be as diverse as this country is diverse. Today, this country includes 39% people of color, and that percentage will top 50% in just a couple of decades. Wouldn't it be awesome if that's what our student body looked like too? Help us imagine that someday soon, Westtown could be fully accessible to all students who connect with our mission regardless of means. Today, like the vast majority of independent schools, we are essentially tuition dependent. But wouldn't it be fabulous to ease that dependence and make admission to Westtown School need blind? Folks, it would take an additional $177 million in our endowment to fund this year's non-remission financial aid. Friends, that's not an unthinkable goal. It's a worthy goal for this worthy school. And finally, today and always, I want to encourage you to tell us your stories. Go to that alumni storytelling booth this very afternoon. You want to hear about your joys at Westtown, the way it has illuminated your purpose in life. But we also want you to feel welcome to shine your light wherever you are inclined. Share with each other, share with me, share with today's students what you think it means to be a Westonian. And finally, friends, a very specific invitation. If you haven't yet visited the girls' collection room this weekend, please do so. There you will find a new quilt, a long overdue companion piece to the others in the collection rooms, those depicting Martin Luther King Jr., Malcolm X, and Mohandas K. Gandhi. For years, Westtown students rightly wondered, we have King, we have X, and we have Gandhi, and that's wonderful. But where are the women? And where are the women of color? The new quilt that was commissioned by Teacher Pat and installed a few weeks ago depicts Nobel and Pulitzer Prize winning writer Toni Morrison. The girls in our Black Women's Affinity group now have another mirror on the wall at Westtown. And all of us can now draw inspiration from the sight of Morrison every time we walk through West End. Check it out. Enjoy. I wish you joy this whole weekend. I wish you joy as you reconnect with this glorious campus, with your memories, with each other. I wish you joy as you run into a new generation of Westonians. And I wish you joy as you think with us about the generations of Westonians to come in future years and decades, how they will rise up as you have done to answer the calling to seek out and honor that of God in each other. Friends, I'm so privileged to be standing here with you today, alumni, alumni, and alumnex of Westtown School. Thank you, and happy Alumni Weekend.
Thank you, Tori. For those of you who haven't met me, I'm Davis Henderson. It is my privilege to be your clerk of the Board of Trustees of Westtown School. When Carl told me I would be following Tori and Don, I didn't realize the emotion that I would be following. Thank you so much, Tori. I would like to just very briefly, in my remarks, connect Don's reference to Westtown Changes Lives and Tori's theme of discerning our way into the future. Alumni Weekend at Westtown is a time to celebrate our connections. It's a time to reconnect with the school. It's time to revisit our memories, and for one very short time to be forever young. So revel in it today, those memories, but welcome the challenges that we've heard this morning, because the school and your Board of Trustees is working toward that future that we look for. Also, thank whoever was in charge of the weather. It didn't look that promising yesterday evening, but I'm so happy that we have a good day. I want to, in my short remarks here, urge you to consider an additional role that each of us can play in ensuring a successful future for Westtown School and our students. That additional way may be something you've thought of, but maybe it is not. And it's to consider a Westtown education for someone in your own family, a child, a grandchild, a niece, a nephew, extend it to your extended family, to a friend, a work colleague, a Westtown education, because I urge you to share your Westtown experience, to encourage others to consider a Westtown education. The vast majority of the applicants to Westtown School, when asked why they applied, wasn't because they found us on the internet, wasn't that they'd heard about our robotics program, or maybe even our basketball team. It was because a trusted friend, an admired friend, encouraged them to consider applying to Westtown. I encourage you to be part of that movement. Advocating a Westtown education with family, friends, and colleagues can bring us wonderful children, but it also brings us wonderful families. Think of the adventure Don had in 2 years and how it changed his life. Westtown is changing lives today. There are many students here whose lives are not only being changed, but so are the lives of their families. Many of the parents of our students today are not Westtown alumni, but through the education and the experiences these children are having, the lives of those parents and those families are being changed. And I know this to be true because I have spoken to those families. Are you aware that of the 40 leading boarding schools in this country, Westtown ranks 3rd in the assistance and financial assistance to boarding students? And I can guarantee you those other 39 schools have some larger endowments than Westtown has. We are a generous school. We are an inclusive school. And a Westtown education may be closer than some of you realize. So I really do encourage you to think about that. If you know someone who would make a good student, who would follow up and apply to Westtown, consider it. Now, there are additional contributions to Westtown. You can contribute to the Westtown Fund. You can make gifts to the school endowment. You can make planned gifts, which are part of your estate planning. Already this year, over 1,100 alumni have made a contribution to the school. And we are on target this year to have the most successful, the largest Westtown fund in the 220-year history of this school. We want to the entire advancement staff and to the entire Westtown nation, I thank you for your generosity and your support of the school. In total, we have 16 classes this year celebrating a reunion. From the class of 1939, which makes it their 80th reunion, do the arithmetic. If you're 18 years old when you graduated 80 years ago, my congratulations to those who made it. It really is a wonderful achievement. In total, alumni from the reunion classes, just the 5-year reunion classes, have contributed $783,000 to Westtown. I thank you all very, very much. You heard Tori refer to our endowment, and it is a goal to increase our endowment. And I can assure you it's at the heart of our mission as a Board of Trustees is to increase our endowment. Increasing the endowment will give the school the resources that we need to make Westtown education accessible to and inclusive of our next generation of change makers. And for those of you who were here last Alumni Day and then here today, you've heard Tori refer to a policy of admission that is need blind. That's something that the Board of Trustees is focusing on. In other words, we look forward to the day we can accept a student regardless of that student's family's ability to pay full tuition. And it is a mission and a command and a desire on the part of our Board of Trustees. Shortly, you're going to hear this year's 50th reunion class, the class of 1969, what they are doing to ensure the accessibility to a Westtown education through supporting the endowment fund, which gives me the opportunity to introduce Quentin Regal and Kathy Mann Kane from the class of 1969 to make their 50th reunion class gift. Welcome.
Very pleased to be able to announce our class gift, but I'd like to put it in a little context first. I was lucky to attend Westtown, being one of 5 kids in my family, on a professor's salary, trying to put us through high school and college. But they took a leap of faith, just as the Westtown founders did 220 years ago. And I found it enlightening, uplifting an experience, and an important place to be during the war in Vietnam. Dan Test and then Earl Harrison were the headmasters. We were on the cusp of the digital revolution. When I started in 9th grade, high tech meant model rockets and model railroading. And then a month and a half after we graduated, man walked on the moon. So there was a lot of change during that period. But our class came of age during a period of tremendous racial and generational conflict. Graduating not long after the terrible events of 1968. And that brings me to our decision about part of our class gift. Kirk Russell served as Westtown's Director of Admissions for 30 years until 1981. His wife, Scotty, also worked here and provided a lifetime of support for him. And I believe their daughters, Paige and Lori, are here today. Not sure. Over here. On February 2nd, 1965, he signed a letter to my parents accepting me for admission to Westtown. We shall look forward with pleasure to having him as a member of the school family and hope that his experiences here will turn out to be happy and profitable ones. I would appreciate your forwarding a $50 registration fee within 10 days so that we may definitely reserve the place. We accepted, and a week later, I turned down a similar letter from George School. Tuition that year was $2,100. In today's dollars, that's about $17,000. The same tuition today is over $61,000. Of course, that's an insurmountable burden for many prospective students. Our class was the first to include students enrolled through the ABC or a Better Chance program to support the enrollment of inner city youth in private schools. One of those students was Methuselah Bradley. He went on to college and law school and then got a master's and PhD in biblical theology and has been a practicing lawyer ever since. Kirk Russell was the one who made Westtown a part of the ABC program when it began and continued to work to support minority student enrollment afterwards. Unfortunately, many of the problems we faced then are still with us today, and to address these issues and other impediments to diversity of all kinds, our class is proud to continue our tradition of designating a portion of our total class gift to the J. Kirk Russell Scholarship Fund.
Alumni days since I was in 2nd grade in lower school. And if you would have told me then I would be standing here at my 50th reunion, I would have told you were crazy. But we've already talked a little bit about Pete Lane, and I just have a little bit more to say about Pete. He graduated from Westtown in 1957 and taught here starting in our 9th grade year for 39 years. He was a teacher, a dean, head of Stonehouse, soccer coach, banjo player, canoe maker, and so much more. To me, he epitomizes the Quaker testimony of community. He used all of his talents joyfully to contribute to the life of the school in every way he could, and always with great care and good humor. He also came from a long line of Westtown alumni. His grandparents attended in the late 1890s, his father and his father's sister in the 1920s, his brother and sister in the 1950s, and a lot of cousins along the way. He's truly a living legacy of some of the oldest families that have carried on the Westtown Quaker tradition since 1799. A scholarship fund was created on the 50th reunion of the class of 1957 to honor him by providing financial assistance to the children and grandchildren of alumni. These students have a special history that empowers them to carry on the traditions of Westtown and its sense of community. I'm so proud to announce that the class of '69 has allocated a portion of our 50th reunion gift to the Peter O. Lane 57 Alumni Scholarship Fund.
Waiting for. We lived most of our formative years in the turbulent 60s when protesting and moving to Canada and dropping out were part instilled in our DNA. I'm sure many of you are wondering whether there are enough of us that were able to make it in the real world and afford to give back a small part of our success. Of course, the answer is in the eye of the beholder. But I'm pleased to announce our class gift in the amount of $409,021.
Absolutely fantastic. Thank you very much. All right. Let me more formally thank the 50th reunion class this way. All the reunion class, I want to thank both the 50th reunion class and all the reunion classes for their generous gifts this year. In your program, you'll find a list of all the participation and gifts made in honor of the reunions being celebrated here today. Please join me in once more recognizing all of these generous alumni. I have two more acts in my waning clerkship. Number one, if you are inspired by what you hear here today, to serve the school, whether it's in giving or with the Alumni Association, working with us on the board and as class connectors, or whatever occurs to you as a way to give back to this wonderful school that we all love so much, please be in touch with Carl to express your interest. I guarantee you he will find something for you to do. So please do that. With that, I'd like to thank you all again for being here, and I appreciate your attendance here today and hope you enjoy the rest of this weekend. Thank you very much.